Imagine what it's really like to have epilepsy under two main headings: focal or partial seizures, reflecting disturbances in only a small part of the brain, and generalized seizures, reflecting disturbances throughout the whole brain. We start with focal or partial seizures, describing localized disturbances of brain activity. I wonder if you can spot anything unusual happening here. One of these young people is having a seizure. And conventionally, they're all classified under two main headings: focal or partial seizures, reflecting disturbances in only a small part of the brain, and generalized seizures, reflecting disturbances throughout the whole brain. We start with focal or partial seizures, describing localized disturbances of brain activity. I wonder if you can spot anything unusual happening here. One of these young people is having a seizure. Let's see that sequence again. If you watch the young man in the blue jerkin standing towards the back, you can see that from time to time the left side of his face twitches. There's no interruption of consciousness, so the attack doesn't stop him playing the game. Where consciousness is fully retained, uncontrolled movements of just one part of the body are called simple partial seizures, reflecting a disturbance in just one small area of the brain. Attacks of this kind sometimes result in nothing more than a tingling sensation in a hand or a limb, or a strange taste in the back of the mouth. The other group of focal seizures are complex partial seizures, usually reflecting disturbances in the temporal lobe. During a complex partial seizure, consciousness is impaired, although to an onlooker this is not always obvious. This young lady, for example, is having a complex partial seizure, in which her normally cheerful personality is apparently eclipsed by apprehension and fear. Yet such outward displays are misleading. Most complex partial seizures are characterized by curious facial expressions, often accompanied by confused behavior and meaningless gestures. All the behavioral signals seen here are entirely automatic, divorced from the real world and unremembered after the seizure. For example, she's quite unaware of the camera, which in fact is very close. A loud noise startles her, but she remains inaccessible. If you spoke to her, she might respond, but probably not very coherently. Here's the same young lady having a more obvious complex partial seizure, showing many of the classical features of this seizure type. Abruptly confused, she responds totally inappropriately to those around her. After rubbing her left arm, she clicks her finger joints and wrings her hands in apparent anxiety, wandering about, plucking at clothes. All these actions are common features of complex partial seizures. A person in this condition may pick up objects, perhaps in a shop, or even undress in a public place. Automatic behavior of this kind, of course, is only too easily misunderstood. Recovery is often slow, with full turning over several minutes. Eventually she recovers fully, rejoining her friends, and and the game starts again, almost as if nothing's happened. In this game, the young lady walking away from us suddenly walks off the field. Unnoticed by her friends, she too is having a complex partial seizure. The sudden departure from the game, the meaningless gestures, the aimless wandering about, the empty facial expressions. All these bizarre patterns of behavior are simply a product of a temporary disturbance in the brain's temporal lobe. And they are typical of complex partial seizures, automatic actions, unremembered after recovery. But in the case of this young lady, recovery is comparatively swift. Generalized seizures result from disturbances throughout the whole brain from the outset. But some attacks are so brief that their occurrence, especially in a school classroom, may go unnoticed for years.
People say, when they first pick up Stephen, people say that he's light. But after a while, they take back that statement. Because he can be as heavy as ever. Oh, pardon?
Sorry?
I thought you said something.
No, I didn't say anything. I think it's granny.
Unlike partial seizures, simple absences are extremely short-lived, and recovery is almost instantaneous. Of the two absences we've just seen, the first is extremely subtle, so it's really quite difficult to spot. Let's see it again. And just once more. Complex absences occur in people with more severe forms of epilepsy. Brief interruptions of consciousness are accompanied by repeated, stereotyped jerking of the head, limbs and trunk. If the jerks are severe, a person may be thrown off balance. Incontinence is sometimes a distressing feature of such attacks. Complex absences can be very prolonged, the jerks subsiding and diminishing in frequency only very slowly. Here's the same young man having another series of complex absences. Supported by his friends to prevent his being thrown off balance, recovery from this attack is more rapid. Where repeated rhythmical jerks are the only feature of an epileptic attack, we describe the condition as a myoclonic seizure. We all experience an isolated myoclonic jerk from time to time, especially when falling asleep, but not in the exaggerated form seen here. Imagine what can happen at the onset of a severe myoclonic seizure if you happen to be carrying a tray of food or picking up a boiling kettle. A series of jerks like this can go on for hours, while consciousness is likely to become more and more impaired. A feature of generalized seizures is their rapid onset, often appearing instantaneous. Tonic seizures, where all the muscles of the body stiffen abruptly, occur without warning. The onset of atonic seizures is equally rapid, but they occur as a result of a sudden loss of muscle tone. Although an atonic seizure is quite short, with rapid recovery, injuries to the head and face are very common because of the nature of the fall. Here's another example of an atonic seizure, where the cause of the fall, complete loss of muscle tone, is clearly visible. Watch the man wearing the protective helmet. Tonic-clonic seizures, commonly called grand mal, are certainly the most immediately recognizable form of epilepsy. Tonic-clonic means stiffening, jerking, describing the two successive stages of all such attacks. Unconsciousness and stiffening of all the muscles at the onset of the attack are followed immediately by violent movements of the limbs and trunk, accompanied by labored breathing. Some people have tonic-clonic attacks only during sleep. And resulting in nothing more than repeated twitching of the cheek. The next three seizures were complex partial seizures, all involving impairment of consciousness and resulting in confusion and various patterns of bizarre behavior. Finally, we saw a number of generalized seizures, all involving total loss of consciousness. These included the briefest of simple absences. Complex absences, a series of myoclonic seizures, a tonic seizure, an atonic seizure, and finally clonic seizures.